Hello, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and it is April 28th. I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of my Cattleya nobiliors. I've got three that are in bud right now and one in bloom. So what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about my culture and my care of these guys, show you some bloom pics and some spike pics, and show you, or not pictures, some videos, as well as showing you exactly where in my yard I grow them. In fact, behind me you can see some of my collection here and how I grow. Typically it's just under the shade of these oak trees, and I estimate it's probably 60 or 70% shade. But my Cattleya nobiliors, I actually grow them quite a bit brighter, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that here in a moment. But first, I want to show you this one. This is Cattleya nobilior. This is an alba. As you can see, there is no real coloration in the flower. I hope the video is picking this up nicely. These white flowers tend to be a little difficult to pick up for cameras, so let me just shove it right here. And you can see where there's no color on the lip except for some yellow. And here you can see some stripes, but that still counts as alba. And when I say stripes, those are yellow stripes. Now you can see that this one comes from a modified growth. So most Cattleyas, they bloom out the top here, but Cattleya walkeriana and Cattleya nobilior as well, they'll send out a whole separate growth, complete with roots and everything. And they'll bloom from that, and then later on in the summer they'll add another growth, a typical growth that looks like a typical Cattleya growth. I'm growing this one in a clear plastic pot with a mixture of large grade Orchiata bark and epiweb, which is this sort of synthetic osmunda fiber made from recycled plastic. And it's pretty good. I think, as you can see, this guy is outgrowing his pot. When I repot it, I'll put it into a clay pot. I like those a little bit better for my conditions. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in just a moment. So here is another Cattleya nobilior with 3 blooms. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you can see these little drops. A little sugar water. It's delicious. I encourage you to try them. I don't know if the sugar drops are just sort of this accidental occurrence, or if they're intentional for ants to come along and eat them and then maybe protect the plant. But in any case, we've got a lot. I mean, look at this. Delicious. So on this one, you can really see the new growth, or excuse me, the modified bloom spike right here. And you know, there's a new root coming out here. This one has 3 flowers. This is an Amalii variety. So the Amalii variety is a little lighter colored. It grows in a slightly drier habitat. So if you think about the Cattleya walkerianas, they grow in a very dry habitat. The Cattleya nobiliors grow in an even drier habitat where they won't get rain necessarily for 6 months at a time. The Cattleya nobilior variety Amalii actually grows in an even drier, more arid part of Brazil, and they are adapted to no rain for extended periods of time. Now that said, doesn't mean that they're not getting moisture. In fact, I've gotten some conflicting advice over the years about how to grow and bloom these guys, because growing them is fairly easy. Blooming them can be a little more tricky. And while I'm talking to you about that, I'm going to show you this last spike here. Nice big fat buds coming out. I'm growing this one outside, so I've got ants running up and down the side, and that's okay. It doesn't bother me. I think this will be a standard nobilior. I haven't seen this one bloom yet. I've had it for a bunch of years. It has this tendency to send out a spike and then abort. This year, for whatever reason, it has decided not to abort the growth, so I'm pretty excited. Back to growing these ones, you know, the two Brazilian growers that I've spoken to at length about growing these guys have said that yes, they do grow in very dry habitat. In fact, one of the growers says that the habitat is so dry during part of the year that butterflies will actually, if you're in the habitat, butterflies will come to your eyes and try and drink the water out of your eyes because there's just no moisture. And that particular grower, he recommends absolute dryness, almost to the point of catasetum dryness for 6 to 9 months. And I've grown them like that, and I've had some success. This is the Amalii. Another grower, another Brazilian grower that I respect a lot, has told me recently, hey, just because that's how they grow in the wild doesn't necessarily mean that's what they need in captivity. He also said that he lived in that part of Brazil for many years, and there are nightly fogs that come in and sort of drench the landscape. So it's not 100% dry. It's not like Arizona dry for 6 to 9 months. It's dry during the day, and there's some fog at night. So when I grow these guys, I give them a very distinct dry period in the winter, but I've started to back off the super, super harsh winter. This year I watered once a week, and one of my friends, the other Brazilian grower, said, hey, you know what, you could probably even water twice a week, and that'll be fine. But in any case, I'm going to start talking to you a little bit about how I grow, and you can see I'm growing in a clay pot, and I'm growing in a mixture of large grade Orchiata bark. I would actually prefer the larger grade than this when I eventually repot this one. And then that same EpiWeb or EcoWeb, I can't remember which one, it's these sort of chunks of recycled plastic. It looks a lot like a Brillo pad, but it's made of plastic instead of steel. And when I repot this one, so you can see this one is putting out roots here. Its next growth will come out here. It's already got a growth here, which is fine because that's still in the pot, but this one is going to just start wandering outside. So since I use Orchiata bark, it lasts forever. So I'll just take this whole pot, I'll set it into a larger pot, and just add media around it. That way I don't have to mess with the roots. If you mess with the roots with these guys, it sets them back for years, which is super frustrating, but it is what it is. This one that's in bloom, the Alba, like I said, is growing in this plastic pot. You can see that it's also wandering outside of its pot, so I'm going to redo this one. I'm going to try and pull the whole thing out and put it into a clay pot with large grade bark, and I'm not going to remove the old media. I'm going to leave it as is to the best that I can and just repot it that way. This is actually the first bloom that I've seen for this one. I got this a couple years back from Redlands. A friend of mine went to Redlands. I still haven't been to Redlands yet. It's definitely on my list of things to do. But it is nicely fragrant, and it's the first time I've seen this bloom. So the Alba variety is very unusual. It's not very common at all. It's not very common in Brazil, and it's definitely not common here in the United States. But it does grow like all the other nobiliors. The shape on this one is not great. So as you may or may not know, I'm an American Orchid Society judge. And so I'm looking at some of these from my judging perspective. And, the Alba variety is very unusual, but the shape isn't great. You can see the lip here is folded over. I would prefer to see a nice flat lip. You can see that there are also big spaces here between the petals and sepals. We call those windows. Ideally, in this particular species, and Walkeriana as well, the breeding is such that these petals are larger. They're typically held flat against each other, so you won't see any space. And that's the kind of thing that you're looking for when you're judging this group. I don't know. I might still take it in. There's judging in San Antonio next weekend. In fact, the San Antonio judging, in case you ever want to go, is the first Sunday of every month at 12:30 at the Schertz Public Library as of April 2019. You know, these things change. If you go to the American Orchid Society website, you can see the judging center schedules in your area. But in any case, I'll bring it in, see if I can get it scored. I assume that I won't. I don't have my fingers crossed, but it's a wonderful little plant nonetheless. Now this one, two things. A, it's not ready to be judged. So next weekend, unfortunately, these will not be blooming probably, and I will probably not get it scored because then I'll have to wait a full month and the flowers will probably die. I think this one is awardable. This is the Amalii. I've seen it bloom before. I think it's awardable, but more importantly to you, the viewer, I want to show you. You can see I had this in a plastic pot as well, growing in large grade Orchiata bark, which is still very solid, very good bark some years later, and I just simply plopped it into a larger clay pot, and it's now outgrowing that clay pot. You can see the sugar drops really well right there. That would probably normally attract ants. So now let's go look at the area where I grow these guys. So one of the first things you'll notice is that I've got a luminette here, and this aluminette is 50%. So when it's 105 degrees out here, they get 50% shade for much of the day. But as you can see, the shade from the oak trees is definitely encroaching and will cover these guys up with significant shading starting around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So that's perfect. The hottest part of the day gets additional shade. But you can see here, this is how I grow my nobiliors and my Walkerianas. I'm not going to pull them out and show them to you individually, but you can see this one is that spiking individual that I was showing you a little earlier. I've got a big Walkeriana back here, and then some other nobiliors, and that's how I grow them. During the summertime, when temperatures are typically above 90 degrees or even warmer than that, I like to water them every single day. There is time-release fertilizer in there, so I don't have to mess around with fertilizer at all. But watering them in clay pots with large grade Orchiata bark every single day during the hottest part of the year, I get big fat root systems and big fat pseudobulbs. And they absolutely love it. They go crazy. The key to this particular group is getting them to dry off rapidly and then watering again. Hello. So it's May 12th, and I have all 3 of those nobiliors blooming right now. So I figured I would have them, I would be able to compare them for you side by side and maybe do a little, I guess, judging or kind of talk to you about the form and the color of some of these flowers and how good or not good they may or may not be. Now that other one that I bloomed, or that I showed you that was in bud, this is more of a tipo. So, let me see here. Big, broad lip, really nice veining. Actually pretty good color on the lip too. But again, the shape is wonky. So, you'll see that the dorsal sepal is folded back. It should be flat. The sepals, the lateral sepals here, are a little twisted. It got a little, looks like a little chomp taken out. This particular flower has been open for about a week, and it's been rained on a couple times, so it's got a little damage from that. Nicely fragrant, but of course the judges don't care about fragrance. So this is not a flower that I would actually show. Actually, last weekend I took this to be judged in San Antonio. I, as a judge, would not score this. I wouldn't even give it the opportunity to get scored, because it's not up to standard for the species. But I brought it down just to see if the other judges agreed, and no one nominated it for scoring. So my assumption was correct. Do you want to point out that I just noticed a new growth is going here? So I'll get this in a larger pot here very soon. It'll be a clay pot, which is what I prefer. And I want to show you a flower, a nobilior. This is the third one. This is the Amalii that I showed you in bud. Unfortunately, for this taping, it's not fully open yet. But the Amalii, compared to the darker pink one that I showed you, which is the tipo, the Amalii is from a drier part of Brazil. So these guys live under, they're adapted to a more extreme life, even than a nobilior, which is already adapted to a very dry life. I am going to, so you can see the veining in the lip there. This thing, like I said, is not fully open. I don't know when the next time it is. I'll have all three of these plants next to each other so that I can compare them for you. So that's why I'm showing you this before it's fully open. I've seen this bloom before. It is a very nice flat flower. It is beautiful. If I had staked this properly, I could probably have it judged, if the timing was correct. Unfortunately, I have to wait about 3 weeks before the next judging in San Antonio. So these flowers will basically be spent. So there's no opportunity nearby for me to get these judged. But I do want to point out a few things. So you notice on this spike, there's 3 flowers on a single spike, which is much better than the other 2, which only have 2 flowers. This one will open flat. You won't really have a whole lot of reflex. The lip does eventually bend down more, and you get a nice plane to this flower. And this one is definitely award quality when it's open at the right time, but not on this particular blooming. You'll also notice that these flowers are crowded. So I've got kind of a floppy spike here. The flowers are crowded, and both of those situations can be rectified a couple different ways. You can put little spacers between the flowers, or wiring that sort of as the buds are growing, you can really get those flowers spaced out. You can also stake the spike so it's a little higher. But I want to show you, I want to have you compare these 2 spikes. Not necessarily the flowers, but the spikes. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this on the camera or not. But you can see how floppy the Amalii is compared to the tipo. This particular spike is really nice, and I didn't do anything with this. This one bloomed outside, and I think just the access to the sun and the wind and the elements caused this spike to be very strong. And when I say strong, it's fully erect. The flowers are spaced out really nicely. Of course, there's only 2 compared to 3. But the quality of the spike itself is significantly better. This one I bloomed inside under lights, and for next year, I'm curious to see, I'll bloom it outside next year, and I'm curious to see if the spike quality is is better next year. In any case, I'm going to put spacers on the flowers, and I'm going to I'll see if I want to stake the spike next year. I'm not entirely sure yet. So those are the 3 nobilior that I wanted to show you that I have in bloom. Hopefully next year I'll have even more as some of my seedlings become larger and larger and of blooming size.